So in this segment, we're going to be committing war crimes and talking about a Kemi Badenoch speech. And I watched about a minute of this, so I'm going to put you guys through it as well because this is just such a dumb, nothing burger speech.
At the very least, the Pax Americana of over half a century is evolving, potentially even ending.
So just quickly, Pax Americana is also called the Long Peace, is a term applied to the concept of relative peace in the Western Hemisphere and later in the world after the end of World War II, because we haven't really beefed with anyone in kind of the Western Alliance, I guess you could say.
We may be witnessing a more fundamental reset, perhaps a return to the world of the strong and the weak.
We have always lived in a world of the strong and the weak. You know, we saw that in the Middle East. We saw Iraq get invaded by Western allies. We saw Afghanistan get invaded as well. We saw Libya get attacked as well. Like this idea that suddenly the whole world is changing, and it's the what do you call it? The liberal the world is falling apart or whatever. It's simply untrue. Simply untrue. Like the world order made no sense anyways. We've seen the Iraq war was illegal under international law, and still the West went ahead with it.
And in such a world, we must not be weak.
Now, what's crazy is imagine being part of the party which hollowed out the military and caused numerous problems with things like procurement and really cut the amount of GDP spending on the military. If I was part of such a party that was in charge and did those things, I would shut the hell up about this. But that's just me.
Our foreign policy should support our national interest. We should review those alliances, methods, and approaches which served us well for 3 generations. Where they work, we should keep them, and where they do not, they should go. The United Kingdom must accept reality. No one.
I really don't like this triple teleprompter thing or whatever. She keeps looking at her eyes, keep darting around. Sorry, guys, it's just annoying. I really don't like her as a person, and as an orator, she's one of the worst people I've ever had the pleasure of hearing speak. Only Jeremy Hunt can top this level of boredom.
Owes us a living. No process is an end in itself. We can no longer hide behind vapid statements that were, at best, ambitious 20 years ago and are now today outright irrelevant. It is time to speak the truth. The world has changed and the UK is not ready. So we
weren't even ready during the Iraq War. Like, we haven't been ready for over 20 years. So, like, this idea that suddenly the UK is not in a good place, like, no, it's only gotten worse, really, since then.
Must change too. The first thing we must define is our national interest. We need a first principles approach that really recognizes that a nation's primary purpose is to defend its borders, its values, and its people. And as important as other objectives may be, the blunt reality is that everything else must be secondary. National interest means a strong military and a strong economy.
So you've completely knackered our economy and your party completely destroyed our military. So again, like, if that's the case, you're saying that that's the most important thing for any country. Well done. You must be playing for a different team, pal, because you've essentially got rid of the first defences of this country.
A recognition that if our supply chains are overly exposed to those who do not share our values, our country is at risk. That relying upon goodwill is a fool's errand. That genuine long-term prosperity is built from real competitive advantage, not vague aspirations. That peace is obtained through strength. That others, even friends, will ultimately put themselves first. And before the inevitable pearl clutching of those who wish it was still 1995, none of this is a selfish objective. We have lived off the inheritance of Thatcher, Reagan, and Gorbachev for far too long.
She's talking about post-Cold War here. I mean, like, we have lived off the success, I think, of NATO and the EU. In that sense, we have lived off the success of collaboration between Western allies. And the reason that's really falling apart is because of Donald Trump. That's the main reason. Donald Trump enabling Vladimir Putin. That's the main reason I think the alliance is kind of crumbling. That and the fact that they've allowed, things like a lot of Chinese money and other kind of money from other dictators as well, in terms of the Middle East, to really weaken democratic institutions, but also weaken the foundations of a country, in terms of them, purchasing assets and pushing up, the cost of living crisis, really, because a lot of these properties and things like that, in order to live in them, you're going to pay rental to a company that is probably offshore and will not pay any tax here. So the whole system is so broken. And that's the real thing that's really destroy a country. Some countries are too big to fall from the outside; they'll fall from the inside. America is one. I think the UK could potentially be another. That it will crumble from inside rather than outside.
Just talked about authoritarian regimes, talking about China, Iran, and Russia. And it comes as the US pivots away from Europe, pivots away from the UK, votes at the Security Council with China and Russia. You just said that the US is an ally, but are you concerned that it is becoming a threat to UK interests? Should we pivot closer to Europe? And just on the ECHR and the International Criminal Court, what are you saying? Are you saying that you now think we should withdraw from these institutions? Thank you.
So, Beth, let me be clear. The US is not an authoritarian regime. It shares those same Western values that we share: free trade, free enterprise, free speech. But what we see it doing is acting in its national interests. It is being realistic, and we need to be so too. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to agree on everything. We disagree with them on that resolution, for example. But that is why I want the Prime Minister to be successful in his talks and find out what the thinking was behind that.
Well, the thing is, Trump wants a Nobel Peace Prize because Obama has one. So he wants to get peace by any means. And if that means selling Ukraine down the river, he'll happily do it.
And when it comes to the ECHR, I have always been very clear that the ECHR should not stop us from doing what is right for the people of this country and what is right in our national interest. And if it continues to do so, at some point we will probably have to leave. What I have not...
So what is the ECHR stopping you from doing? Deporting people to Rwanda, which is seen as a not safe country. If anything, us deporting people to a country that is not safe doesn't make us any safer. It doesn't, all you're doing is stripping away people's rights. How does that protect the citizens of this country?
Agreed with is deciding that we should leave without having a plan for what that looks like and how to do so in a way that makes sense. We still believe in the rules-based order. We have to, because we are a trading nation.
So clearly you believe in the rules until you disagree with the rules.
Point I made in my speech. I was Trade Secretary for a long time. Without rules, then things just don't work. But other countries are breaking the rules, and we need...
Such as who? Who's breaking the rules? Who's deporting people to Rwanda illegally? Who's doing this?
We need to get serious about that and not pretend that those things aren't happening. And that's really what I want us to focus on.
So you're conflating really two different things here. You were asked about the ECHR. The ECHR doesn't govern over things like trade. You mentioned you were the Trade Secretary. So are you talking about countries breaking the rules in terms of trade? Or what are you talking about here? And she is partly right in terms of the world is changing in terms of not necessarily allegiances changing or hardline allegiances, but in terms of voting patterns and in terms of certain things that are being voted on in the UN. So I think Ridge explains it quite well.
Now, it feels like the old order is shifting. The US voted today at the UN Security Council alongside Russia, North Korea and Belarus against a resolution condemning Russian aggression in the war in Ukraine. Now, you don't need me to tell you that these are not the United States' normal allies. And we're all trying to wrap our heads around what's going on and what it means for the war in Ukraine, but also for the world, for the alliances and the institutions that have built up over the last 100 years or so and now feel shakier than ever. Trying to work out its place in all of this is Europe. Keir Starmer is going to meet Donald Trump later on this week, and today it was the turn of the French president, Emmanuel Macron, desperate to cement...
Yeah, Macron really torched Trump in their meeting, to be fair.
...the alliance between the US and Europe and the military backing too. They've had a long fireside chat in front of the White House fireplace that's been the backdrop for so many of these awkward meetings. We've already had a little bit of a flavour of what's been said. This is Donald Trump being asked if he supports the idea of sending European troops to Ukraine to back a ceasefire.
European troops may go into Ukraine as peacemakers. So when the agreement is done, they can watch that everything's followed properly. I don't think that's going to be a problem. And a lot of the European countries, I think, I don't want to speak for France, but I know that the president's talked about doing that also. I think that'll be a very good day when we can go in as peacekeepers as opposed to what's going on right now with everybody being killed.
Will they have U.S. backing, those troops going into Ukraine? Will they have U.S. backing from U.S. troops?
Well, we're going to have a backing of some kind, and obviously the European countries are going to be involved, and I don't think you're going to need much backing. I think that's not going to be a problem.
Obviously, they will need backing because you're the most powerful. You run the most powerful country in the world. Like if America says, "Yeah, these troops have U.S. backing," rushing, and they're definitely going to they're not going to consider really doing any sort of attack on things like peacekeepers if they don't think those peacekeepers are going to be backed or can essentially be hemmed in, similar to what Israel did to UN peacekeepers in Lebanon. Then those peacekeepers won't do anything apart from be live targets for the Russian military.
Problem. Once an agreement is signed, Russia's going to get back to its business, and Ukraine and Europe are going to get back to their business. I don't think it's going to be a problem.
So I don't share a sense of optimism, but Kemi Badenoch is partly right. The allegiances are kind of shifting a little bit, but the rest of it is kind of a bizarre speech considering the context of the Tories essentially decimating the economy and also the military as well. So the argument she makes no sense. And also, the world is changing. It sounds like something from like a game, like a speech. The world is changing once again. It literally sounds like Genji and Hanzo. What Genji says to Hanzo in the best game kind of animation I've ever seen. But yeah, I don't know. This kind of dumb. Her speech is so boring, and she's really going to struggle in opposition because whenever I listen to her, I want to fall asleep. So sorry I put you guys through this. And if you ever get tired, what you can do is find this video and just listen to it before you go to sleep. I might do that today. And I'll catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.